The runaway slave discovers a hidden community protecting others from the master. In the sweltering heat of a Georgia summer in 1847, Isaiah crouched low behind a thicket of cottonwood trees, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. The plantation lights flickered in the distance, faint but menacing, like the eyes of some beast hunting in the night. He'd been planning this for months, ever since Master Harlan had sold off his sister, Layla, to a trader heading down to New Orleans. Isaiah couldn't bear it anymore. The whips, the endless fields, the way they stripped away every bit of humanity until you were just a shadow of yourself. No, tonight was the night he ran. He was 23, strong from years of back-breaking labor, but fear made his legs feel like jelly. He'd heard the stories whispered in the slave quarters. Runaways caught and dragged back, their backs turned to ribbons, or worse, sold off to the sugar plantations where men didn't last more than a few years. But freedom called to him louder than the overseer's horn at dawn. He'd stuffed a small sack with stolen cornmeal, a few dried apples, and a rusty knife he'd found buried in the dirt. His only guide was the North Star, that faithful pinpoint of light his grandmother had taught him about before she passed. As the moon climbed higher, Isaiah bolted from the thicket, his bare feet silent on the damp earth. The plantation dogs were quiet tonight. Thank God for that small mercy. He darted across the open field, keeping low, his breath ragged. Every rustle in the bushes made him freeze, imagining the hounds or the patrollers closing in. Patrollers, those white men on horseback who roamed the roads, eager for the bounty on a runaway's head. Isaiah had seen what they did to folks like him. He made it to the edge of the woods, plunging into the cool embrace of the trees. The forest was alive with sounds. Crickets chirping, owls hooting, leaves whispering secrets in the wind. It was a world away from the regimented hell of the plantation. But danger lurked here too. Snakes, wild animals, and worst of all, getting lost. Isaiah pushed on, following the star northward, his mind racing with memories. Back on the plantation, life had been a cycle of pain. Master Harlan was a cruel man, his face always twisted in a sneer, his whip cracking for the smallest infraction. Isaiah remembered the day he'd been branded after trying to help an old man who'd collapsed in the field. The hot iron seared into his shoulder, the smell of burning flesh filling his nostrils. "That's to remind you who owns you," Harlan had growled. But it only fueled Isaiah's resolve. He wasn't property. He was a man, with dreams and a soul that yearned for more. Hours blurred into one another as he trekked through the underbrush. Thorns tore at his ragged shirt, drawing blood, but he didn't stop. By dawn, exhaustion clawed at him, but he found a hollowed-out log to hide in, covering himself with leaves. Sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of pursuit. When night fell again, he pressed on, his stomach growling from the meager rations. On the third night, things took a turn. Isaiah had crossed a shallow river, the water cool and refreshing against his aching feet. But as he emerged on the other side, he heard voices, low, urgent whispers carried on the breeze. He froze, dropping to his belly in the mud. Peering through the reeds, he saw a group of men on horseback, lanterns swinging from their saddles. Patrollers. One of them laughed, a harsh sound that sent chills down Isaiah's spine. "Reckon that boy's long gone by now," one said, his voice thick with tobacco chew. "Harlan's offering $20 for him alive, 10 if he's dead." Isaiah's blood ran cold. They were hunting him specifically. He held his breath as they passed, their horses' hoofs thudding like thunder. Once they were gone, he scrambled up and ran harder than ever, veering off his northward path to throw them off. The forest grew denser, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes under the moonlight. He lost track of time, his mind foggy from hunger and fatigue. It was near midnight when he stumbled upon the clearing. At first, he thought it was a mirage, a small fire flickering in the distance, surrounded by shadowy figures. Smoke curled up lazily, carrying the scent of cooking meat. Isaiah's mouth watered, but caution held him back. Who would camp out here, so deep in the woods? Runaways like him? Or worse, trappers who might turn him in for the reward? He circled the camp slowly, keeping to the shadows. There were about a dozen people, men, women, even a couple of children. Their clothes were patched and worn, but they moved with a quiet confidence. One man, tall and broad-shouldered with a scar across his cheek, stood watch, a rifle slung over his shoulder. Isaiah's heart skipped. Armed blacks. That was unheard of. Slaves weren't allowed weapons. It was a hanging offense. Curiosity won over fear. Isaiah stepped forward, hands raised. "I ain't here to cause trouble," he called out softly. "Just passing through." The camp erupted into action. The watchman swung his rifle around, and others grabbed sticks or knives. A woman with sharp eyes and braided hair stepped forward, her voice steady. "Who are you, stranger? And why you sneaking round our fire?" Isaiah swallowed hard. "Name's Isaiah. Ran from Harlan's place down south. Been on the run 3 days. I mean no harm." Murmurs rippled through the group. The scarred man lowered his rifle slightly. "Harlan, you say? Mean son of a gun. We know his kind." He glanced at the woman, who nodded. "Come on in, then. But if you're lying, it'll be the last thing you do." Isaiah approached warily, his eyes widening at the sight. The camp was well hidden, tucked into a natural dip in the land, surrounded by thick brambles. Tents made from oilcloth and branches dotted the area, and a pot bubbled over the fire, filled with stew that smelled like heaven. These weren't just runaways. They had supplies, tools, even a few horses tied nearby. They offered him a bowl, and he ate greedily, the warmth spreading through his body. As he did, stories emerged. The woman's name was Sarah, escaped from a Virginia plantation years ago. The scarred man was Jacob, a former blacksmith who'd killed an overseer in self-defense and fled. This camp, they explained, was a way station, a hidden spot where runaways could rest before heading further north. But there was more. Jacob leaned in, his voice low. "We ain't just hiding. We're fighting back. Harlan and his like, they think they own the world. But we've got ways of protecting our own." Isaiah's eyes widened. "Fighting back? How?" Sarah smiled faintly. "You'll see if you stay. But first, rest. Tomorrow, we move." As Isaiah lay down on a bed of moss, his mind whirled. This wasn't just escape. This was something bigger. A community in the shadows, defying the masters. For the first time in days, hope flickered in his chest, brighter than any star. The next morning dawned gray and misty. Isaiah woke to the sound of quiet activity. People packing gear, sharpening tools. Jacob handed him a sturdy stick. "You'll need this. We're heading to the main camp today. It's deeper in, safer." Isaiah nodded, falling in line as the group set out. They moved single file, silent as ghosts, navigating paths only they knew. Sarah walked beside him, sharing bits of her story. She'd been a house slave, learned to read from the master's children when they weren't looking. "Knowledge is power," she said. "That's why they keep it from us." As they trekked, Isaiah spotted signs of their ingenuity. False trails branching off, traps set for pursuers. This wasn't a ragtag band. They were organized. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a hidden valley. Below, nestled among the trees, was the community, a cluster of cabins camouflaged with vines and branches. Smoke rose from chimneys, and fields of vegetables grew in cleared patches. Children played, laughter echoing softly. Jacob grinned at Isaiah's astonishment. "Welcome to Freedom's Hollow. We've been here 2 years now. Started with 5 of us, now we're near 50. Isaiah descended into the valley, marveling. There were blacksmith forges, a small schoolhouse where an elder taught letters, even a lookout tower. But beneath the peace, there was purpose. Men practiced with rifles, stolen or traded, Jacob explained. Women sewed disguises and mapped escape routes. That night, around a communal fire, the leaders gathered. An older man named Moses, with white hair and a voice like thunder, spoke. "We've got word Harlan's sending more patrollers. One of our scouts saw gearing up." Murmurs of concern. Sarah added, "They're after Isaiah, but they'll stumble on us if we ain't careful." Moses nodded. "Then we protect what's ours." Jacob, take a team and set diversions. Isaiah, you in? Isaiah hesitated, then straightened. Yes, sir. I'm in. As the meeting broke, Isaiah felt a shift. He wasn't just running anymore. He was part of something. But danger loomed, and he knew the master wouldn't give up easily. The first full day in Freedom's Hollow felt like waking from a long nightmare into something that couldn't quite be real. Isaiah stood on the edge of the central clearing, watching the morning mist lift off the hidden valley like a curtain rising on a world he'd never dared imagine. Cabins, real cabins, built from logs and mud-chinked walls, dotted the landscape, half swallowed by vines and overhanging branches so that from above, or even from the ridge, they vanished into the green. Smoke rose thin and careful from stone chimneys, and the air carried the smells of baking cornbread, wood smoke, and turned earth. Jacob clapped him on the shoulder, nearly knocking him forward. Come on, newcomer. Ain't no idle hands here. Everybody earns their keep. Isaiah followed him past a vegetable patch where women and older children hoed rows of collards, beans, and sweet potatoes. A young girl, no more than 10, looked up and flashed him a shy grin before bending back to her work. In the distance, the clang of hammer on iron rang out from the forge. Everything moved with quiet purpose, like a well-tuned clock nobody outside the valley knew existed. Moses, the elder who'd spoken the night before, waited for them near the center of the settlement. He was taller than Isaiah expected, lean but strong, with white hair cropped close and eyes that seemed to see straight through a man. A long scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw. Story was he'd taken a whip across the face for refusing to beat another slave, then broken the overseer's arm and run that same night. Isaiah, Moses said, voice deep and steady. Sarah tells me you got fire in you. That's good. But fire without direction burns everything down. You willing to learn our ways? Isaiah met his gaze. Yes, sir. I ain't never had a choice before. Now that I do, I want to choose right. Moses nodded once, as if that settled it. Then Jacob'll show you the rounds. Listen close. One mistake here can bring the whole world down on us. The morning passed in a blur of introductions and lessons. First came the boundaries. Invisible lines marked by notches on trees, piles of stones, or breaks in the undergrowth that only the community knew how to read. Step outside them without a scout, and you risk stumbling into a patrol or leaving tracks that led straight back home. Then the defenses. Jacob led him to a low rise where two young men practiced loading and firing rifles, old flintlocks, mostly, patched and repaired a dozen times, but deadly in trained hands. Ammunition was precious. Every shot had to count. Nearby, a woman named Ruth demonstrated snares and deadfalls meant for game, but easily adapted for men on horseback. We don't go looking for trouble, she said, tightening a loop of wire. But if trouble comes looking, we make sure it limps away, if it walks away at all. Isaiah's stomach twisted at that. He'd never killed a man. The thought of it sat heavy, but so did the memory of Master Harlan's whip and the auction block where Layla had disappeared. He kept quiet and watched. By midday they reached the schoolhouse, a single-room cabin with a slanted roof and benches made from split logs. Inside, an old woman named Aunt Clara taught a dozen children their letters using charcoal on slabs of bark. When she saw Isaiah peering in the door, she beckoned him closer. You read any? She asked, no judgment in her tone. He shook his head. Overseer caught me looking at a newspaper once. Beat me till I couldn't stand. Said curiosity was dangerous in folks like us. Aunt Clara's eyes softened. Dangerous to them, maybe. Come back when your chores are done. We'll start slow. The idea that he could learn, openly, without fear, made something loosen in Isaiah's chest he hadn't known was knotted tight. Afternoon brought work. Jacob assigned him to the wood detail, chopping and stacking firewood under the watchful eye of a man named Silas, who had only one arm but swung an axe, better than most with two. As they worked, Silas told his story in short bursts between swings. Lost the arm to a cotton gin back in Alabama, ran north with his wife and daughter, found the hollow after nearly starving in the swamps, place saved us," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Now we save it back." By dusk Isaiah's muscles burned and his hands blistered, but the ache felt honest, earned, not inflicted. Supper was communal. Rabbit stew thick with wild onions, cornbread, and sassafras tea. They ate in shifts around the big fire pit, voices low, but alive with talk of the day's work, of scouts returning, of rumors from the outside world carried by new runaways. Sarah sat beside him, passing a tin cup of tea. "How you holdin' up?" "Better than I have in years," he admitted. "Still feels like a dream I'll wake up from, back in the quarters with the horn blowing." "It did for me too, first weeks. Then one morning you realize the sun's coming up and nobody is yelling your name with a whip in hand. That's when it gets real." Later, as the fire died to embers, Moses called the council together again. This time Isaiah was invited to listen from the edge of the circle. Scouts had returned with troubling news. Harlan had doubled the reward and brought in professional slave catchers, men with bloodhounds trained to track for days. They were sweeping the countryside in grids, burning barns and questioning free blacks along the roads to flush out any who might be helping runaways. Jacob spread a hand-drawn map on a stump, marked with charcoal trails and landmarks. "They're 3 days out, maybe 4. Moving slow, cause of the dogs, but steady. If they keep this line, they'll cross our outer traps by week's end." Moses rubbed his chin. "We got choices. We can pull everyone deeper, abandon the outer camps. Or we can slow 'em down, diversions, false trails, maybe take a few out quiet-like." A younger man named Caleb spoke up, voice hot. "I say we hit 'em hard. Show these catchers the woods belong to us now." Murmurs of agreement and dissent rose. Sarah shook her head. "We hit hard, they bring more. Army, even. We ain't ready for open war." Moses raised a hand for silence. "We do what's needed to protect the hollow. No more, no less." Jacob, pick 6 for a ranging party. Said noise traps, fouled water, anything to turn 'em aside. If it comes to shooting, make it count and vanish. His eyes found Isaiah across the fire. "You want in on the ranging party, son?" Every eye turned to him. Isaiah felt the weight of it, the trust, the risk. He'd been free less than a week, yet here they were offering him a rifle and a place on the line. He thought of Layla, sold away, of the brand on his shoulder, of the children learning letters in the schoolhouse. "I'm in," he said, voice steady despite the hammering in his chest. Jacob grinned, fierce and approving. "Good. We leave before dawn. Get some sleep." Isaiah lay that night in a small cabin shared with 3 other men, staring at the underside of the roof while crickets sang outside. Sleep came slow, tangled with visions of bloodhounds and gunfire. But beneath the fear ran something new. Purpose. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving. He was choosing what to fight for. At the edge of dreams, he heard Aunt Clara's voice again. Curiosity is dangerous to them. Maybe so. But it was starting to feel like the most dangerous thing of all was hope, and he had a belly full of it now. The ranging party left Freedom's Hollow 2 hours before dawn, when the forest was still black and the air carried the sharp bite of coming winter. 7 figures moved single file along a deer trail only Jacob seemed to see. Jacob himself in the lead, then Isaiah, Sarah, Caleb the hothead, Ruth with her snares, a quiet scout named Amos who could mimic any bird call, and a wiry man called Zeke who carried a burlap sack that clinked softly with every step. No one spoke. Words were for the hollow. Out here, sound could kill you. Isaiah's borrowed rifle felt heavy across his back, an old smoothbore musket with a cracked stock Jacob had wrapped in rawhide. It had 1 shot, maybe 2 if he was lucky and quick. Powder and ball were measured out carefully the night before. Just enough for what might need doing, not a grain more. Waste was a luxury they couldn't afford. They traveled light. Each carried a small pouch of parched corn, a tin cup, and a blanket rolled tight. Isaiah's blistered hands from the woodpile had been wrapped in soft cloth by Sarah. The ache was dull now, but he felt it with every grip on the musket. By the time the sky turned the color of wet ash, they were 5 miles out, skirting a swampy bottomland where cypress knees rose like crooked teeth from black water. Jacob raised a fist, and they dropped into the reeds. Far off, a dog bayed, deep, hungry, the sound of a bloodhound catching scent. Jacob's scarred face tightened. They're closer than we thought. Amos slipped forward alone, belly crawling until he vanished into the brush. 10 minutes later he returned, moving like smoke. 6 men, 4 horses, 2 dogs, camped on the old logging road. Fire's low, but they're up. Dogs chained to a wagon wheel. Jacob nodded, already thinking. We turn 'em east, away from the hollow. Zeke, your noisemakers ready? Zeke grinned, teeth white in the dim light. He opened the sack. Glass bottles stoppered with rags, filled with turpentine and sulfur scraped from match heads. Fire bottles. Crude, but when shattered against a tree they flared bright and stank like hell itself, enough to spook horses and confuse dogs. Sarah pulled a folded paper from her shirt, her hand-drawn map inked with pokeberry juice. She traced a route with one finger. There's a dry creek bed half a mile north. We lay a false trail along it, double back through the water, then hit them with noise and fire on the far side. They'll run east straight into the briar thicket. Takes 'em 2 days to cut through that mess. Caleb muttered. We could do more than scare 'em. Jacob shot him a look sharp enough to cut. We do what keeps the hollow breathing. Nothing more, nothing less. You want glory, go fight the whole damn South alone. Caleb shut up, but his jaw worked like he was chewing nails. They split into pairs. Isaiah went with Sarah. She moved through the woods like she'd been born to it, placing broken twigs and scuffed earth to suggest a runaway heading north along the creek bed. Isaiah followed her lead, heart hammering every time a branch cracked underfoot. At one point she stopped, knelt, and pressed her palm to the dirt. Horse tracks. Fresh. They passed here yesterday. She looked up at him, eyes steady. You scared? He thought about lying, then didn't. Yeah. But not enough to turn back. She gave a small nod, almost like approval. Good kind of scared keeps you alive. They worked until mid-morning, planting signs of passage. A scrap of cloth torn from Isaiah's old shirt snagged on a thorn bush. A footprint deepened with a stick. A few drops of chicken blood from Zeke's pouch to excite the dogs. Then they doubled back, wading ankle-deep in cold creek water to hide their scent. By noon they regrouped on a ridge overlooking the catcher's camp. Through the leaves Isaiah saw them clear. Rough men in wool coats and slouch hats, rifles stacked like hay against a tree. One chewed tobacco and spat streams of brown juice. Another sharpened a knife the length of a forearm. The dogs strained at their chains, noses working the air. Jacob whispered the plan one last time. Amos would start with bird calls to draw attention east. Ruth and Zeke would circle wide and set the fire bottles. Caleb and Amos would lose a few shots into the dirt to stampede the horses. Sarah and Isaiah were to stay high, watch for anyone trying to flank, and cover the retreat. Isaiah's mouth went dry. He'd never fired at a man before. The first bird call floated through the trees, Amos doing a perfect bobwhite. One catcher looked up, frowning. Then another call, farther east. The men muttered, grabbed rifles. Zeke's first bottle arced through the air and shattered against an oak. Flame whooshed up with a sulfur stink that carried on the breeze. Horses screamed and reared. The dogs went mad, lunging until chains bit into their necks. A rifle cracked, Caleb's signal shot kicking dirt near the fire. The catchers shouted, scrambling for weapons and mounts. Another bottle exploded, then a third. Smoke rolled thick and yellow. Chaos. One catcher, bigger than the rest with a red beard, kept his head. He bellowed orders, pointing east toward the false trail. Most followed, dragging dogs and swearing. But two peeled off west, toward the real direction of the hollow. Sarah saw it same time as Isaiah. She touched his arm, pointed. Jacob was already moving to intercept, but he was too far. Isaiah raised his musket without thinking. The bearded leader was mounting up, but these two were on foot, pushing through brush straight toward the ridge. Sarah whispered, "We stop 'em here or they find the back trail by nightfall." Isaiah's hand shook as he primed the pan, poured powder, rammed ball, and patch. The men below were close enough now he could see sweat on their faces, hear their cursing. One looked up, straight at him. Time slowed. Isaiah saw the man's eyes widen, saw him swing his rifle up. He pulled the trigger. The musket kicked like a mule, smoke blooming in a gray cloud. When it cleared, one catcher was down on his knees clutching his leg, howling. The other dove for cover behind a log, firing wild into the branches overhead. Bark exploded near Isaiah's head. Sarah's rifle spoke beside him, calm, precise. The second man jerked, dropped his weapon, and crawled into the brush moaning. Below, the main group was already thundering east, horses panicked, dogs baying after the false trail. Jacob's voice carried up the ridge. Fall back. Now. Isaiah stood frozen, staring at the blood on the leaves below. His shot hadn't killed. The man was screaming, alive, but he'd done it. Pulled the trigger on another human being. Sarah grabbed his sleeve. Move, Isaiah. We ain't got time for regrets out here. They ran. The retreat was disciplined, leaping fallen logs, splashing through streams, doubling on their own tracks, until even Amos admitted no dog could follow. By dusk they were miles away, holed up in a cave the community used as a fallback. No one spoke much at first. Caleb cleaned his rifle and grinned like it was Christmas. Ruth checked the wounded catcher's abandoned gear they'd snatched in passing. Extra powder, a good knife, coin purse with $8 silver. Jacob finally broke the silence. We bought 3, maybe 4 days. They'll follow the false trail into the briars, lose time, lose heart. By the time they double back, we'll have the hollow ready. He looked at Isaiah. You kept your head. Saved us a fight we couldn't afford. Proud of you, brother. Isaiah managed a nod, but his stomach churned. The smell of powder lingered in his nose, mixed with the memory of that man's scream. Sarah sat beside him later, sharing a strip of dried venison. First time's always the hardest, she said quietly. Don't matter if you killed or just wounded. You crossed the line today. But remember why. He stared into the small cook fire. I keep thinking about his face. He looked surprised. They all do, when they realize we shoot back. She paused. You sleep if you can. Tomorrow we get home. That night Isaiah dreamed of blood on leaves turning into Layla's face, her eyes pleading as the auctioneer's gavel fell. He woke sweating, the cave mouth gray with approaching dawn. When they finally slipped back into Freedom's Hollow 2 days later, the whole community turned out quiet like, no cheers, but warm nods, hands on shoulders, bowls of stew pressed into their hands. Children stared wide-eyed at the captured gear. Moses embraced Jacob, then Isaiah, his grip strong as iron. You did good, the old man rumbled. But it's just the beginning. Harlan won't quit. Neither will we. Isaiah looked around at the hidden cabins, the gardens, the faces lit by soft morning light. For the first time, the place didn't feel like a dream. It felt like something worth bleeding for. And somewhere deep inside, the fear had shifted into resolve. The days after the ranging party returned settled into an uneasy calm in Freedom's Hollow. The slave catchers had been turned aside, tangled in briars and false trails for nearly a week before limping back toward Harlan's plantation, short 2 men and most of their pride. Word came by way of a sympathetic Quaker farmer who traded quietly with the community. The catchers had sworn the woods were haunted, full of ghosts and devil fire. Harlan raged, posted new rewards, but for now the patrols pulled back to the roads and left the deep forest alone. That breathing space let the hollow heal and prepare. Gardens were expanded, a new cache of ammunition buried under the floor of the forge, and every adult spent time on the rifle range. Even the children learned to move silent and watch the ridges. Isaiah threw himself into the work, chopping wood, standing watch, drilling with the musket, until the kick no longer surprised him and his shots grouped tight on a stump at 50 paces. Anything to keep his mind from circling back to the man he'd wounded and the crack of Sarah's rifle finishing what he'd started. But the hollow wasn't just about defense. There were evenings of music, someone playing a battered fiddle while others clapped and sang low, spirituals that carried double meanings of heaven and freedom. There were lessons with Aunt Clara, where Isaiah scratched his first clumsy letters into bark with charcoal. ISIH. The shape of his own name in his own hand felt like claiming a piece of himself the plantation had never allowed. And there was Sarah. She found him one afternoon by the creek that supplied their water, skipping stones across the slow brown current. She sat beside him without asking, picked up a flat pebble, and sent it spinning 4 skips before it sank. "You still carrying it heavy?" she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Surprised. Like he never thought one of us would shoot. "That surprise is what keeps us alive," she said quietly. "They think we are born to bow. When we don't, it shakes their whole world." She skipped another stone. "Don't mean the weight gets lighter. Just means you learn to carry it." Isaiah looked at her then. Really looked. The strong line of her jaw, the old burn scar on her forearm from a kitchen accident back in Virginia, the way her eyes held steady but never cold. Something warm and terrifying stirred in him. "You ever think about after?" he asked. "When we are truly free, I mean, not just hidden." She smiled, small and sad. "Every day. A little house maybe. Land nobody can take. Children who never hear a whip." She glanced at him. "Somebody to share it with." Their hands brushed as they both reached for stones. Neither pulled away. But peace, even hidden peace, never lasted long. It was late one evening, 10 days after the ranging party, when Amos came back from a solo scout pale and moving fast. He went straight to Moses' cabin, and word spread quick. By the time the communal fire was lit, everyone knew something big had happened. Moses stood in the firelight, Amos beside him. In Amos's hand was a folded sheet of paper, real paper, cream-colored and fine, the kind only white folks used for letters. "Amos found this nailed to a tree on the old post road," Moses said, voice carrying to every shadowed face. "Addressed to the runaways in the deep woods." Murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarah stood close to Isaiah, her shoulder touching his. Moses unfolded the paper and read aloud, slow and deliberate. "To the Negroes calling themselves free in the western woods, I know where you hide. I know how many you are. I have eyes watching even now. Return the boy Isaiah and any others taken from my lawful property within 7 days, and I will let the rest of you scatter north without pursuit. Refuse, and I will bring fire and lead enough to burn every tree between here and the river. No quarter. No survivors. You have been warned. Josiah Harlan." Silence fell thick as winter fog. Then Caleb spat into the fire. "He's bluffing, trying to scare us into turning Isaiah over." "Maybe," Jacob said, arms crossed. "But he named the right number, 48 souls. That ain't guesswork." Isaiah felt every eye turn to him. His throat closed. "I ain't going back," he said, voice rough. "And I ain't letting any of you pay for me." Moses raised a hand. "Nobody is turning anybody over. We decide together." He looked around the circle. "But we need truth. How does Harlan know our numbers? How does he know we're here at all?" The question hung unanswered until Ruth spoke up. "Could be a guess. Could be one of the catchers saw smoke or tracks before we turned them. Or," Sarah said slowly, "somebody's talking." The word traitor wasn't spoken, but it sat there all the same. That night the council met long past midnight. Scouts were doubled. Every trail in and out watch. Quiet searches began, cabins checked for anything out of place. Questions asked gentle but firm. Trust, so hard won in a place like the Hollow, began to fray at the edges. Isaiah couldn't sleep. He sat outside his cabin, staring at the stars through the canopy. Footsteps approached soft. Sarah again. "They'll find nothing," she said, sitting beside him. "We're careful. Too careful for a spy." "Then how?" he whispered. She was quiet a long moment. "There's another way. Sometimes white folks who claim to help, they help only far enough to feel good about themselves. Then they trade information for favor or money." Isaiah's stomach dropped. "The Quaker farmer? The one who brings salt and news?" Sarah nodded grim. "He's helped us true for 2 years. But Harlan's rich. Offers the right reward. A man might bend." Or woman, Isaiah said, thinking of the traveling preacher's wife who'd brought cloth last month. They sat in silence, the weight of suspicion pressing down. The next morning brought worse. Amos and Zeke returned from checking outer traps with a prisoner. A thin black man in ragged clothes, hands bound, face bruised from the capture. He'd been caught skulking near the North Ridge with a lantern and a folded map. Moses brought him before the community at midday. The man trembled, eyes darting. "Name's Tobias," he said when pressed. "Ran from a plantation near Augusta. Been on my own 3 weeks. Got lost. Saw your smoke. Was coming to join." But when Jacob searched his pack, they found 20 silver dollars sewn into the lining, new coins, straight from a bank. And the map showed Freedom's hollow marked clear as day, with notes on watch posts and the creek ford. Tobias broke then, crying. "Harlan's man caught me 2 days out. Said he'd send me north free and clear if I just carried a message and drew what I saw. Said nobody'd get hurt. Just wanted to scare y'all into giving up one manual." The crowd stirred, angry and afraid. Isaiah stepped forward. "He used you, same as he uses all of us." Moses' face was stone. "We can't kill him. He's one of us, even if he chose wrong." Sarah spoke up. "But we can't let him stay. Not now." In the end, they blindfolded Tobias, marched him 10 miles east, gave him a day's food and a warning. If he ever came within 20 miles again, there'd be no second chance. They watched until he disappeared into the trees. But the damage was done. Harlan knew too much. The 7-day clock was ticking. That night Moses gathered the leaders again. "We got choices, none good. We can abandon the hollow, split up, head north in small groups. Some will make it, some won't." Caleb shook his head. "We lose everything we built. Or," Moses continued, "we stay and fight. Make this ground too costly for Harlan to take." Jacob rubbed his scar. "He'll bring more than catchers this time. Militia maybe. Dogs. Torches." Sarah looked at Isaiah across the fire. "There's a third way. We take the fight to him." Every head turned. She stood. "Harlan's plantation sits fat and careless. His overseers drink at night. His barn's full of cotton. We know the land. He don't know we know it. We hit him where it hurts most, his pocket. Burn his crop, free his people, make him too busy chasing his own tail to chase us." Silence stretched. Then Jacob started to grin, slow and fierce. Moses looked around the circle. "It's war then, not defense. Offense." One by one, they nodded. Isaiah felt the shift inside him, fear turning to something sharp and bright. Harlan had taken his sister, his years, his peace. Now it was time to take something back. As the meeting broke, Sarah caught his arm. "You ready for this?" He met her eyes. "I was born ready. Just took me a while to know it." In the days that followed, Freedom's hollow transformed. Quietly, carefully, they planned a raid unlike any they dared before. And Isaiah found himself at the heart of it. Not just a runaway anymore, but a man choosing his war. The plan took shape over 4 tense nights around Moses' table, lit by a single tallow candle that threw long shadows across the hand-drawn maps. Harlan's plantation lay 12 miles southeast as the crow flies, 15 by the hidden trails they'd use. Sarah knew it best. She'd spent time there as a child when her old master had visited on business, and later from stories traded with runaways who'd come through the hollow. The big house sat on a rise overlooking the cotton fields, with slave quarters down by the river bend, barns and gin house clustered behind. Overseers' cabins ringed the edges, and dogs roamed loose after dark. "We don't go for blood if we can help it," Moses said, voice low but firm. "We go for the crop, the tools, the people. Burn what feeds his wealth. Open the doors for any who want to run. Then we vanish before the county wakes up." The raid party would be 12 strong, no more, to keep quiet. Jacob would lead. Sarah knew the layout. Isaiah insisted on going. Nobody argued after what Harlan's letter had named him. Caleb, Ruth, Amos, Zeke, and 5 others rounded out the group, seasoned scouts and shooters all. The rest of the hollow would stay behind under Moses' command, ready to defend or evacuate if the raid stirred up a hornet's nest. They left 2 nights before the new moon, when the sky would be blackest. Each carried a fire pot, clay jars packed with pitch, sulfur, and rags for wicks, plus a rifle or musket, powder, and a blade. Isaiah had a new flintlock now, traded from the Quaker before trust soured. Sarah carried her old reliable and a coil of rope for any locked doors. The journey took 2 full nights, sleeping by day in thickets and cold camps without fire. They skirted roads, waded streams to break scent, and once lay flat in a ditch while a patrol of horsemen clattered past close enough to hear their spurs jingle. By the second dusk, they reached the final ridge overlooking Harlan's land. From the crest, Isaiah saw it all spread out below like a hated memory come alive. Rows of white cotton glowing faint in the twilight, the big house with its columns and lamplight spilling from windows. The dark shapes of the quarters where people still moved like ghosts. Smoke rose from the gin house chimney. Harvest was late this year, and the bales were stacked high in the barns waiting for wagons. Sarah crouched beside him, face hard. See that stand of pecans by the river? That's where the quarters start. Dogs are tied there at night. We cut 'em loose first, let 'em run wild and confuse things. Jacob nodded. 3 teams. Sarah and Isaiah take the quarters. Wake folks quiet. Tell 'em the doors are open if they want freedom. Caleb and Ruth hit the gin house and barns. Amos, Zeke, and me go for the tool sheds and overseer's cabins. We light fires on the way out. Meet back here at the ridge by the first rooster crow. Anybody not here by then, we mourn later. No one spoke after that. They just checked priming, tightened packs, and slipped down the slope like shadows. Isaiah's heart pounded so loud he feared the dogs would hear it. But the night was on their side, cloud cover thick, no moon, only starlight to guide them. They split at the pecan grove. Sarah cut the dogs' chains with wire snips. The animals bolted into the dark, barking in confusion rather than alarm. The quarters were long, low buildings of rough pine, doors barred from outside. Isaiah's stomach turned at the sight, same as every plantation he'd known. Sarah worked fast, sliding the bars back one by one. Inside the first cabin, people stirred under thin blankets, eyes wide with terror in the faint light of her shielded lantern. Quiet, she whispered as they sat up. We're from the deep woods. Doors are open tonight. Any who want to walk north, come with us now. Any who want to stay, go back to sleep and say you saw nothing. Either way, the fires start soon. Harlan's losing his crop tonight. An old woman crossed herself. A young man with whip scars fresh on his back stood immediately. I'm coming. More followed, some eager, some hesitant, a few shaking their heads and pulling blankets higher. In the end, 23 chose freedom. Men, women, a handful of children carried on hips. Isaiah helped herd them toward the trees, speaking soft, promising safety in the hollow. Across the fields, the first glow rose, orange and hungry against the black. Caleb's work. The gin house went up fast, flames licking high, lighting the sky like false dawn. Shouts erupted from the big house. Bells clanged. Men spilled from the overseer's cabins, pulling on boots and grabbing guns. Jacob's team had done their part. Axes taken to plows and wagons, seed cotton scattered, tools buried in the well. Now the barns burned too, stacked bales blazing like giant torches. Isaiah glanced toward the big house. Figures ran on the porch, white figures, one taller than the rest, bellowing orders. Even at this distance, Isaiah knew the voice. Harlan! Something snapped inside him. All the years of bending, the brand on his shoulder, Layla sold away. He stepped out from the trees before Sarah could stop him. Isaiah! She hissed, but he was already moving, rifle up. He didn't run, just walked steady across the stubble field toward the house. Flames lit his path, throwing his shadow long. Overseers saw him, swung rifles. Shots cracked wild in the chaos. One ball tugged at his sleeve, but he kept walking. Harlan stood on the steps, face red in the firelight, pistol in hand. He saw Isaiah coming and raised it. You, he roared. Boy, you brought this on yourself. Isaiah stopped 30 paces out, rifle steady on Harlan's chest. Around them the world burned, barns roaring, people shouting, freed folks vanishing into the trees with Sarah guiding. You took my sister, Isaiah called, voice carrying clear over the crackle. Took years of my life. Thought you owned the world. Harlan sneered. I do own you. Papers say so. Drop that gun or I'll. Isaiah shot him. Not in the chest. In the shoulder, same place Harlan's brand still ached on Isaiah's skin. The master spun, pistol flying, and fell hard against the steps, howling. Overseers hesitated, unsure now with their master down and fires raging. Jacob's voice cut through the night. Fall back. Isaiah stood a moment longer, watching Harlan writhe. Then Sarah was there, pulling him away. He'll live to remember this. That's worse than dying. Come on. They ran. The raid party regrouped on the ridge as planned. 12 out, 12 back, plus the 23 new souls trailing wide-eyed and silent. Behind them, Harlan's plantation burned bright against the sky, a beacon visible for miles. By morning it would be ash and ruin. They didn't stop until well past dawn, deep in a swamp where no horse could follow. There they rested, shared water and cornmeal, tended minor wounds. The new runaways stared at their liberators like they were angels or demons, maybe both. One woman, older, with gray in her braids, approached Isaiah. You the one shot the master? He nodded, wary. She took his hand in both of hers, rough and strong. Then bless you, child. My boy got whipped to death last spring for looking at a book. Tonight feels like justice. Sarah found him later, sitting apart. You all right? He thought about it. The weight was still there, the man he'd shot in the woods weeks ago, Harlan tonight. But it sat different now. Not crushing. Sure. I'm better than all right, he said. For the first time, I feel like a man who chooses his own name. She smiled, leaned her head on his shoulder. In the distance, faint on the wind, they could still hear dogs barking and men shouting back at the plantation. But the hollow was waiting, and north lay farther still. The raid had changed everything. Harlan's power was broken, at least for now. Word would spread through the quarters across 3 counties. There was a place in the deep woods where black folks fought back and won. And Isaiah knew, as they rose to march again, that whatever came next, militia, winter, the long road north, they would face it together. Not as slaves, as a people choosing freedom. One burning barn, one open door, one pulled trigger at a time. The return to freedom's hollow felt like stepping into legend. They came in just after sunset. 35 souls where 12 had left, dusty, bone-tired, but walking tall. The watchman on the ridge spotted them first and sent up the signal. 3 quick hoots of an owl, then silence. By the time the group reached the valley floor, the entire community waited in the clearing. No fires yet, just starlight and held breath. Moses stood at the front, arms folded, face unreadable until Sarah stepped forward and said, It's done. The crop's gone. The quarters are empty of any who wanted out. Harlan's hurt, but breathing. A murmur rose, then cheers, quiet at first, mindful of the woods, but growing until laughter and weeping mixed in the cool night air. Children ran to parents and siblings they'd feared lost forever. The new arrivals stared around in wonder at the hidden cabins, the gardens, the armed sentries who greeted them as equals. Isaiah stood a little apart, watching it all. The brand on his shoulder still ached when he moved wrong, but the deeper ache, the one that had lived in his chest since Layla's sale, was quieter now. Not gone. It would never be gone, but shared, somehow, among all these faces. Sarah found him there. She slipped her hand into his without a word. Together they watched Moses embrace Jacob, watched Aunt Clara press cornbread into trembling new hands, watched Caleb, for once not bragging, help a limping older man toward a cabin. Later, when cook fires were finally lit low and stew bubbled thick with rabbit and winter greens, the stories began. Not boasts, but testimonies. One woman told how she'd grabbed her 2 children and run when Sarah opened the door. A young man showed the fresh welts on his back and said he'd never felt pain sweeter than the pain of running free. Someone started a spiritual, soft, rolling, the kind sung in fields to pass secret messages, and 50 voices joined, harmony rising through the trees like smoke. Moses waited until the song faded before he spoke. "Tonight we struck a blow," he said, standing so the firelight caught the white in his hair. "Not just for us, but for every soul still in chains who'll hear about this. Word will travel, down rivers, along roads, in whispers between quarters. Harlan's ruin will tell them the masters ain't gods. They bleed, their barns burn, their power breaks." He paused, looking around the circle. "But blows bring answers. Militia will come looking. Planters will band together. Rewards will climb. We bought time and hope tonight, but we didn't buy peace." A hush fell. "So we choose again. Some of you new folks might want to keep moving north, Canada, where no paper can drag you back. We'll guide you, provision you, send scouts. Others might stay and help us hold this ground, make the hollow stronger, a beacon instead of just a hiding place." He turned to Isaiah. "And some might dream bigger still." All eyes shifted. Isaiah felt Sarah's hand tighten in his. He stepped forward, voice steady though his heart raced. "I've been thinking on it the whole way back," he said. "Harlan's weak now. Others like him will be watching, scared. If we stop here, they regroup. If we keep striking small, smart, like tonight, we can free more, break more chains. Maybe link up with other camps folks say are out there, deeper in the swamps or up in the hills." Murmurs of agreement, some uneasy. "I ain't saying open war," Isaiah went on. "I'm saying we don't just run or hide no more. We build something they can't destroy. A network, safe houses, raiders who hit and vanish, schools in the woods teaching our children to read the world and fight for it." Sarah spoke beside him, strong and clear. "And we send parties north in spring, big ones, well armed, with maps and allies. Not trickles of scared runaways, but whole families walking free in daylight when the roads are watched by friends instead of enemies." Moses smiled then, slow and proud. "Sounds like a plan worth living for, and dying for, if it comes to that." Votes weren't taken with hands raised. They were taken with nods, with amens, with the quiet commitment in people's eyes. By the end, the hollow had chosen. They would grow, defend, and reach out. Freedom wasn't a place you reached once and rested. It was a fire you carried and passed on. Winter settled in hard after that. Snow dusted the ridges, and the community turned inward, repairing cabins, smoking meat, teaching new arrivals letters and rifle drill both. Isaiah and Sarah shared a small cabin now, nothing fancy, just logs and a stone hearth, but it was theirs. On the longest nights they lay tangled under quilts, talking low about the future. Land in Canada maybe, or staying to lead raids, or both, freeing others first, then building their own. One evening in early spring, scouts brought word. Harlan had sold what remained of his land and moved to Texas, broken and bitter. Militia had come looking once, but found only empty woods and cold trails. The network was already spreading, smoke signals from a camp in the Carolinas, a runner from Tennessee bringing news of another hidden valley ready to link up. Isaiah stood on the ridge one dawn, watching the sun rise gold over the valley. Below, children chased each other between cabins. Men and women worked the expanded gardens. Sarah came up behind him, arms sliding around his waist. "Thinking about Layla?" she asked softly. They'd sent word south through trusted channels, but no answer yet. "Yeah," he said, "but also about tomorrow." She rested her chin on his shoulder. "Tomorrow's ours to make." He turned in her arms, kissed her slow and sure. In the distance, Aunt Clara's voice rose, teaching a new crop of children their letters. Somewhere Jacob laughed, deep and free. Rifles cracked on the practice range, steady, confident shots. Isaiah looked north, past the trees to the open sky. "One day," he said, "we won't need to hide at all." Sarah smiled against his lips. "One day. But until then, we fight smart. We live full. And we keep the fire burning." Hand in hand, they walked back down into freedom's hollow, not an end, but a beginning, a place where runaways became builders, victims became warriors, and hope, hard-won and fiercely guarded, lit the way forward. The masters had ruled by fear for generations. Now fear had changed sides, and in hidden valleys across the South, more fires were starting, small at first, but growing, just like this one.